Today, we welcome presidential historian and New York Times best-selling author Douglas Brinkley. Before we begin, remember to look below and hit the subscribe button. Douglas is a professor of history at Rice University, a contributing editor to Vanity Fair, and a member of the board of directors for the National Archives Foundation. Douglas has written many books, including Silent Spring Revolution, which speaks to the environmental movement and the legislation from 1960 to 1973, which was a game changer to America's approach to environmental issues. An American Moonshot, which is a fascinating look at the American space race against the Soviets at the height of the Cold War. Welcome, Douglas Brinkley, to the conversation.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks for being here. I want to start with, who is your favorite president to write about?
It changes, but traditionally it's Theodore Roosevelt, president in 1901 to 1909, only lived to be 60 years old, but he had such a action-crammed life. I ended up writing a book called The Wilderness Warrior on Theodore Roosevelt and his crusade to save America, and how he saved so many national parks and historic monuments, national forests, and the like. And he wrote so much. He wrote like 38 books and 150,000 letters. So you have all, as a historian, all of that written record to pull upon. And it's also the beginning of, really there's television, TV type, meaning film footage of him. There's a lot of visuals of TR as our first 20th century, real 20th century president. So I've been drawn to him a lot. I do enjoy deeply Franklin D. Roosevelt. I've written 2 books on FDR and have not been able to do the kind of larger than life book on him, which I hope to, maybe if I'm not too old, get to one of these days. Somehow both Roosevelts are the ones I like the most.
Do you like looking back? Do you want to go back further, like to George Washington, or you don't like that time period, or where do you?
Well, when you're an
What's your time
academic,
period?
like I am, meaning I had to go up from being undergrad and get my master's doctorate, and then you get a temporary 1 year, then you're an assistant professor, associate, full tenure. You can't deviate. When I'm my time, it's a world of specializing. So I was the Cold War historian, and I had to kind of stay in that box for quite a long time. It's only once you're tenured, you kind of can go window shopping other ideas around, like I do now, in a larger American studies sense. But the whole field of presidential studies came simply because I was writing books on presidents, and David McCullough, Doris Goodwin kind of chopped some wood for some people like John Meacham or myself that we could be considered a presidential historian. That's because we're on TV and that's what they call you on television. But I've written books on so many different things. Probably the hardest book I ever did was Wheels for the World, a really fat book on the history of the automobile, Henry Ford, Model T, moving assembly line. It got all, a lot of my life was in that book, but people forget about it simply because it's not under the rubric presidential history.
So now that you brought that up, how similar is the invention of the automobile to today with the invention of the electric car?
Well, I'll answer that and just say all that was to say, when the specialization bit is, I couldn't just get in my career, you just can't leap from writing about Harry Truman, Cold War, to go to the founding, the founders or the Constitution, because you wouldn't get a job. That's only something that journalists that become historians seem to be able to do with free will. Nobody's holding them to any rules. But when you're coming out of the academic world, you're getting hired in a particular field of study. The automobile is everything to me. I'm not a tech person, but I care mightily about cars. In fact, right now I'm writing a history of Route 66 that went from Chicago to Santa Monica, looking at the era of beautifully made American vehicles and how that became the new transportation mode in the United States. Once, the 1908, the Model T, and then the Federal Roads Act of the 1920s created all these numbered roads that we're on of today. And they started, Route 66 connecting the Great Lakes, Pacific Ocean. And of course, it's become storied in history because John Steinbeck called it the Mother Road and Grapes of Wrath. And Woody Guthrie sings about it in his Dust Bowl ballads. It was the khaki highway in World War II that connected all of these big new munition facilities together, and convoys of army going up and down Route 66, or General Patton training on it. Cold War, post-war era, once Nat King Cole did his song, Get Your Kicks on Route 66, it was a time of consumers buying cars, and it got very connected to the jukebox and diners and neon signs and motels, and it created this whole roadside America that people are fascinated with. And then 66 got decommissioned in 1985 because of the Eisenhower highway system. The I-75s or I-10, the super slabs, placed all the old roads. 66 has persevered in a truncated and bisected way. 85% of it is drivable, and people are hunting for nostalgia or for let's get off the boring interstate. We have some time to explore, but we'll now still take to the old road.
I mean, it's fun to drive. I've done a trip from Arizona to Maryland, and it's fun to drive and see America and to
Yeah,
be in the car. And then you realize like America is very different. It's the same but different.
it's the same but different. And, it comes out of when Jack Kerouac's novel On the Road of 1957, and when it was published, celebrating the road trip or being on the road or finding yourself on the road. And, I always kind of believed in that idea that there are a billion forms of American culture. And you got to get out there and see them. And so I just love the country so much. And as I'm getting to a certain age, at least the presumption I made was that it would be great to go on the old road and see some of the old places that are still existing. It's turned out to be a much more difficult project because you're having to deal with, it wasn't everybody's same experience. If you were poor, Route 66 meant something different than somebody wealthy. And if you were black, you weren't allowed after sundown at 50% of the 66 counties. I'm having to deal with race and gender, big agriculture versus small farms, environmental degradation, exploitation of native culture for commercial. I can't just be a blind book to the reality. I can't just be selling the myth of the road. So I'm trying to take a hard look at what the road meant in American history.
That's a fascinating look because it means something to American history as we travel through it. Let me ask you this: as we turn 250, America turns 250 July 4th, and I look at America, has the American experiment failed, or is this just a transition as we go into adulthood?
Well, I don't think America's failed at all. I mean, it seems to me to be win-win-win from, the Declaration of Independence to winning the American Revolution right up to today. What is true is we're in troubled waters for a number of different reasons. One is, if we're dealing with the presidency, I mean, I think the executive has way too much power. The diminishing Congress, role of legislature in American life, partisan behavior by the Supreme Court. But more to the point, we're now turning on each other by whether you're Trump or not Trump, and that's not good. And Trump's been misbehaves on a daily basis, shattering norms and the like, which isn't copacetic to my way of looking at how tradition matters, how you keep a continuity, and how you look for bipartisan openings. But it doesn't rattle me that much. Times come and go. That we'll have new presidents and all, but what does start getting concerning is our great gift of technology, which is the gift we're talking on right now, being Zoom, but I use it, love it. But there are warning signs of who's going to be dealing with AI. Why are we getting rid of human jobs, replacing them with robots? Are we really addressing climate change in the sense of human dislocation, or what happens in disasters on coastal areas, hyper flooding? So when you add those other kind of strange or existential things into the mix of our politics, where there's national distrust in institutions. I mean, Trump's operating at a 38% approval rating right now. Kennedy and Bill Clinton had like 62% approval. So when you're 62%, you can go to the moon. you can get things done, but if you're operating at a deficit of, 38 or 40, it's hard to get good things done. I've been disappointed at 21st century because I think since Citizens United, just too much money. Politics is all about money, and most of the good people don't want to enter the fray because of the way we dehumanize anybody who runs, not just person running, but their family. And so we've lost some of what is best about our democracy is that the people will rise to the top for public service. Now, good people want to make money for themselves, and that's it. And so we hopefully we'll find a way to, reform Citizens United in the coming years. But the heart of the American people is great. I travel around like that. You go to little towns. The Americans are so great, and that we'll have a redemptive moment coming up, I believe, in the future.
So, and we started talking about AI, and AI connects into my next question, which is how do you get students involved in history? Because history is one, I think history is so important to understanding where we are, where we're going, and how we get to the next step. And I think it also calms us because we understand like what happened before. It also can cause a little panic. So, how do you get students involved in history?
Yeah, I mean, I got it. Yes, you're right. It's humanities in general just being smashed at universities, budgets slashed. It's not a grand time for the humanities. But however, there's often golden opportunities when things aren't going in the right direction. Students love to learn about the past. It's the job of the teacher, professor to make it exciting. These are young people that have been brought up with their iPhone and with all sorts of visual razzle dazzle and TikTok dynamics. And you have to bust through that with old fashioned storytelling. Just see history as a story. This happened, then this, and try to explain people in history in a dramatic way. If you can make your lectures lively enough, students, like every generation, will lean in and they'll really enjoy it and they'll start thinking about it. So I don't think, it's over for the field of history, but it does mean why aren't we teaching American history in middle school and high school in a proper way? Why aren't we doing civics education? Why aren't we teaching about geography of our country and the world? I think they become grounding mechanisms. If you learn those while you're young, you feel a little bit grounded. I mean, there are people right now coming home for Thanksgiving, and they're not even sure about anything in the county where they're going to college. They don't know the name of the river and the mountains. They don't know, what tree is right outside their dorm room. We pulled away so much into a STEM world, and we're looking upwards and satellites and the future, but we need to put time back on Earth, know where we're hiking, know what's around us, because there is a nature deficit disorder. I mean, people are connected to the natural world anymore because we're not a rural society. People don't live from, out in and grounded to bird. Instead, they want to rush to cities and get into a condo with basket hanging out of it, and, we peer out from there. And sometimes it's good to have the feet on the ground. So hiking, walking, just has to be encouraged to book learn.
Are you teaching differently now
Oh, they're
since when
different.
you started?
Do I mean, AI is so like you can't do AI. You can't beat AI. It's going to get you. Now you could bust a student on AI, but it doesn't do you much good. They're learning the art of the prompt. And so you can't defeat it. But I hand out blue books, meaning little composition books. And for their exams, like next week or 2 weeks, they'll have a final. You have to handwrite the final in the blue book. That way they don't use your laptop and you're able to start seeing what the student really knows by forcing them to have no aid except their mind pen to blue book. That's it. And it's usually a way I can discern who's the real A student and who's the imposter A student and who's the true C student.
I have a daughter who's 13, and if she talks about AI, she's always nervous that she's going to get caught. And not that she's not using AI, but she worries about it. And she doesn't want to even touch the computer. And I find that really interesting when I started college, we were just getting the internet. And now there's a pushback from using the internet for homework and stuff. So I find it we're in a different pattern now.
She's the beginning of a different pattern right now, and it's because you're not going to win with AI. Then what frustrates the 13-year-olds is there are people that are using AI, and if they find out that the AI kids are getting A's, and I'm getting a B, doing it the old-fashioned ways, it seems unfair. So that's why it's up to the teacher to understand that AI is not going anywhere. It's a tool, but also make sure there's that old-fashioned porthole, where you can not use AI and you can judge people that aren't, because your daughter, she's working on papers without AI.
Yeah.
But once she gets to that, in the booklet I'm giving her, she'll do better than some of the people that have been over reliant on AI, because she's been thinking and writing on her own and developing that skill. But there are going to be moments where she's feeling like, she's losing out. And that's unfortunate.
Yeah. In I'm going to change gears to your book, Silent Spring Revolution. Are we currently living up to the activism of people like Rachel Carson?
Well, look, I've written books. I did the first wave of environmentalism in America. Conservation was called, but Theodore Roosevelt's presidency. After that, there was a second wave with FDR in the 30s, 40s. And the third wave is my book, Silent Spring Revolution, 1860 to 1973. That was the era where the word environment replaced conservation. And that's the time when it was bipartisan, but we created the Clean Air Act of December 1963 for stationary pollution. We created the Clean Air Act of 1970, going after automobile emissions. We did the Clean Water Act, which would save places. Great Lakes would be dead, not for the Clean Water Act and getting clean drinking water. We did Endangered Species Act of saving animals in peril, on and on and on. Marine Mammal Acts, and it was all in that 70s period. And Rachel Carson's the pivot, because she said it's about public health also. And she gave birth to the idea that, look, being an environmentalist doesn't mean I'm putting on a backpack and going to hike the Brooks Range of Alaska. It means I'm concerned that my kid will have to go to the hospital if they jump into the Mississippi River, because it's so
Yeah.
toxic, or that the grass in our backyard or in the school playground's been sprayed with pesticides, and if they can get sick just by falling asleep in the grass. That opened up the field, because now it gave environmental health and warnings, and it's ended, and we don't have a fourth wave since that period. We almost had it with climate change, with Al Gore and one say in 2000 we might have. There've been a couple of openings, but alas, we're seeing right now you can't even get a climate news story out there. It's as if it doesn't happen anymore. The last year, it's now the media won't talk about it after that's all they were doing was talking about it. So you're just waiting. But the reason, the hope is, we have been teaching ecology, climate, and we've hired environmental lawyers, environmental science departments at colleges. There's a whole raft of smart people going into the environmental field in one way or another. And we're collecting the data. They're kind of in waiting. And so it's just going to be a moment when we're ready to reprioritize this. And unfortunately, it usually happens out of a crisis where a city dies from an inversion of air, or, where there's this public mourning of the last of a charismatic animal that's now gone, or, something's a trigger point. I mean, in the 60s, Rachel Carson was going after DDT, and DDT had a symbol in the eagle, because the bald eagle, our national symbol, was going extinct because DDT thinned the eggs of the eagles, and they were dying in mass, and there were very few left. So that became a rally point. So we're ready, but we don't know quite how to, move to a new environmental ethic, because we're going back now to say, look, let's stick with oil and gas for the next 40 years, and then we'll see what happens.
Do you think if it wasn't so political, it would be different? Because I think climate change is as a political issue on what side of the spectrum. And if it was more like, I have to take care, I don't want to get sick, I have to take care of myself, I don't want to fall asleep on the grass and get sick.
Well, the
Like that.
biggest converts to environmental thinking are either people that are living in a toxic area and find out, you know, meaning environmental justice. My neighborhood is surrounded by what should be a super fun toxic site. That'll rally a community. NIMBY, not in my backyard. If you get a wealthy people living in Carmel, California, and suddenly the Trump administration wants to build oil platforms, that community, Democrat or Republican, will unite against those oil platforms out of their view shed. So there are all these different little motivators for things, but the climate issue was lots been done, but we still don't have the electric vehicle that fits the American consumer, meaning we are an automobile nation and we're spoiled, and that you can't bring in a product like an electric car that evolves. The beauty of a gasoline run car is you go in, you put your key, you turn it, you shift it, and off you go. And there's gas stations everywhere. And sometimes people get much more paranoid about technology blinking on and off, being stranded. I mean, one story of an electric car leaving somebody marooned in Chicago where there's nowhere to get a charge. So that runs on it just makes people very afraid of electric vehicles. So instead of blaming the American people, we have to deal with our mindset, and we have to learn to make an electric car feel so simple, so easy, or a hydrogen fuel cell car that the least technical person on the planet can easily drive it. And
Yeah.
that a
When
massive pain.
Yeah, when I was driving across America with my friend, he has a Tesla, and there was a car accident in Arizona. We're driving on a one lane road, and there was a car accident, and we were stuck on the road for 6 hours because we didn't have enough charge to go back. And the next charging station was like 3 miles from where we needed to go. So we were stuck there for 6 hours while they cleaned up the accident. And then we got to go forward. So, and there
There,
were like
too much.
6 or 7 Teslas that were all stuck in the back with us,
There you go. That's
Yeah.
the problem.
That,
And people have figured that out. So everybody's in debt, credit cards, barely making ends meet. The car has to be something they're relying on that simplifies their life. Because we've turned driving sometimes into being a way to shut our brain off. We're turning on, we're going, we're coasting. It's a road trip. We're driving between two cities, but when it's a lot in front of you and you're learning it anew, and then incidents like are happening, people will say, I'm not ready for that. I'm of an older generation. And I think naturally, people that introduce products want to appeal to young people, get young people into the electric car, Tesla. But their expense point isn't really for young people. The key is, how do you get older people into it? How do you let older people feel comfortable, and then it'll trickle down? That hasn't happened. My generation, I'm in my 60s, we're still driving our cars or trucks or all with gasoline, because gas stations have become not a restroom stops. They've become places to get a snack or a cigarette or walk the dog or whatever your case may be. They're cultural. And the electric makes you feel different than the rest of the crowd. When you're in a Tesla, people are noticing you as you're different than the other vehicles going on there. And so he has that exceptionalism about it. Wow, I look at that Tesla. On the other hand, I never think I want to be in one. My mind's always, I'm glad I'm not in one, because I don't want to deal with what you just had happen.
yeah.
And that'll get ironed out, but it's not there right now.
No. No, I drove the Tesla. It was my first time in one, driving one, and I didn't feel comfortable.
So there you go.
I like to have control of the car. I like
Yes.
to have both hands on the wheel. I like to be in control, and that just made me feel uncomfortable a lot of the way.
That's
Yeah.
it. And they got it until you get the old school people onto it. It's going to be a while, because there's nobody I know that's enjoying their electric experience. If they are, they're buying, or they're just doing a mile around their house or something and like to show off that they have an electric, but it's not working well, nor are robotic trucks, or trucking with no driver. And these just add anxieties to our life that we're not doing the right thing. Well, I should be driving an electric. Why not have robotics, and instead of just being human and getting through our day and treating whoever we meet nicely, we're we're always feeling guilty about something, and try to get rid of that, not to worry.
I saw a driverless car driving on the Upper West Side. I guess they were testing it, or and it freaked me out. It was not. I didn't look at that and feel like, oh, I feel comfortable now.
So I'm wildly opposed to driverless cars for a whole bunch of reasons. Just another form of way of punishing American people, not caring about American workers, trying to detach humans from existence. I find it all bogus.
I want to turn to one question that I think a lot of people have, depending on which side of the aisle you fall. If you fall, some people say we're having a constitutional crisis. Some people say we're not. Depending where you fall, how do you look at this situation today? Like, are we there? Are we not there?
Well, usually in history, sometimes we don't know what we're living in. This is certainly from a presidential history point of view, a wild, strange, bizarre moment where we have a president of the United States who operates, as Nixon once said, you're president, you're not beholden to the law. Trump just runs wild, and we just don't know where he gets stopped or how he gets stopped. But we're seeing the lower courts in particular do their job. We're seeing the opposition party organizing in some ways. We're starting to see some cracks in this monolithic, deviate from him on a couple of issues even. It's starting to kind of get looser now, but it's not been a great year, 2025, when you're trusted institutions and fire people in a cold, willy-nilly fashion. And dude certainly has the right on a mandate to look for people that are in our country that are criminals from abroad, to get rid of them. The mask with the ice, all it's just kind of been an ugly, grim-looking 2025. I don't know too many people that have been feeling upbeat about it.
As we wrap up, I just wanted to ask you how, as looking at a presidential historian, looking at America in 250 years, where do you think we are? Where do you think we're going?
I think we're going forward like we've always gone. And, we're looking at what the world will be like in 100. You and I won't be here. Hopefully our kids will be. And you hit a certain age where you're trying to do everything for your kids, for their future. How do you make the country better? And it still gets down to getting educated and learning a trade, finding a way that you can be part of a modern economy, or at least finding a lifestyle that you're comfortable in. We just all have to put whatever we can and fight for things like the cost of college is so prohibitive for families, to send a kid to a good school. Ways that we can help working America get through this tech age and start caring about nation building and public service again. But it'll happen. I mean, we go through waves. Comes from a dramatic shift, and maybe it is the new norm. I mean, but I don't think so. He's a cult of personality, and I don't think there's this Trump effect where he gives a baton to a JD Vance and suddenly JD is the next Trump. I don't see that happening. I think Trump had created such a vision of the guy who fires people in The Apprentice and got into people's homes with television, and just kind of is a one-offer in a way. But they're not in yet. I recognize that we live in the age of Trump. I mean, people are going to look back on the last 10 years, and he's the dominant figure, bar none. He's it in the world. He's not somebody that's easily brushed away because he's having a big impact. To his, what will his legacy look like when he's gone? But we all run out of gas. We all don't live forever. A bit of a detached perspective when you're living in the middle of it. It creates some, anxiety for people that are worried that we're losing our democracy at a rapid clip.
You are very hopeful. That is why I wanted to talk to you, because I look at the hope that you bring, and I understand where we are. We also have to look at where we came from.
And you have to remember, uh, teaching college students, which are young people, it's no different really than teaching high school students. They got to have hope. How do you expect them to go forward? You want them to be depressed all the time? You want them to be anxiety ridden? You want them to be, crunch up in a ball? Want them to say it bursts over? I mean, we have a responsibility to talk about hope and try to encourage another generation to not be afraid to protest or for office, or create a job that saves the natural world, or get engaged with the labor union, or these are fights that brought us to where we are, and they have to continue the fight. We're counting on them. So the most we could do now is fill them up with some hope and tell them to go get them. Because or this baby boomer generation that I'm part of, we've run out of gas.
Yes. But we have to look to you to help us get there.
I'm doing what I can to help, and that's where teaching comes in. And also on the airwaves, I try to remain as hopeful as I can. Like the British said in World War II, you have to stay calm, and doesn't help now for people to panic and pull their hair out. We just got to kind of forge forward and realize we'll get through this. I mean, when you're looking at Vietnam era, 58,000 American soldiers dead, untold maim, the whole trap was not that long ago and consumed a generation. We have different challenges now, but there have been dark times of challenge, certainly the Civil War being the premier one. But, we have to feel that we'll get through what we're in right now. But it may be a long 3 years for some people, 3.5 years.
Yes. Thank you, Douglas Brinkley, for joining the conversation today. And thank you for sharing your thoughts and your insights. Thank you to our listeners for joining me today. And remember, if you enjoyed this conversation, to hit the subscribe button. Until next time,